Fanher System, Navia, War Room. Wyatt sat across from Commander Redford, both men sharing an otherwise amicable silence, were it not for the tension that permeated the entire room like a lingering background noise. Clara told him about the pirate incursion, but little else, mainly because she had to decide what the next course of action would be. The arrival at the Fanher System was accompanied by an announcement and a general order to prepare for an upcoming engagement. His daily routine was interrupted that morning by the same gray-haired summoning directly to the war room instead of his quarters. For over 20 minutes at least, nothing had changed between them. Yet, the more he looked at the aged commander, the more he was sure something was troubling the man, even if his occasionally flickering eyes weren't a factor in reaching that conclusion. Arming himself with courage, Wyatt asked, "Commander, who is Raventomb?" Redford's high-end cybernetic eyes turned to face him, his expression one of focus, cold seriousness, and no small amount of hatred masked behind the composed exterior he wanted to portray. "You weren't told?" "Clara and Cynthia told me about the attack and the change in the original plan, but nothing else." "I didn't ask more," the pilot confessed. Redford hummed deeply. "I suppose you were prudent not to do so? Both of them only know that name due to gossip and footnotes. I had to inform them who Ykanti Adant is before the general announcement was made." Wyatt nodded once. "Commander, if I may ask, is that man truly that dangerous?" "Enough to make you look so troubled?" he asked tentatively and respectfully. Redford blinked once, and for a fraction of a second he thought he recognized guilt in the commander's eyes, but it was gone faster than it appeared. "Among other issues, yes, Wyatt. Ykanti Adante is a dangerous man driven by contempt, ambition, greed, pride, and narcissism. Make no mistake, Wyatt. Raventomb has been a blight upon the principality for over 50 years, answered Redford with no small amount of contempt of his own. Wyatt raised an eyebrow in confusion. "I've never heard of him, sir." "But I don't understand. If he's that dangerous, why hasn't the Royal Navy dealt with him?" "It's not as simple as that, Wyatt." Redford crossed his arms, leaning back on his seat. "The Royal Navy requires the permission of not only the Prince, but also of the Council of Nobles, and that of the standing Duke or Duchess Draymore to commence any large-scale mobilization. Then there's the matter of which numbered fleet would be selected to embark. Each numbered fleet operates independently in their respective duties and routes, but none, except the 5th, would let the chance to receive glory and honor slip by their fingers. Every fleet admiral and their admirals would bicker back and forth for months, if not years." A tired, defeated sigh escaped the older man's lips. "Then, what's worse, is the selection process of which ships, formations, officers, troops, and equipment are to be sent forward. The allocation of resources, who the overall commanding officer will be, and which great houses will be involved. By Julius, the great houses themselves may offer private warships to join the effort, which brings yet another layer of problems and permissions needed to even consider green-lighting such an assault." A sad, dejected chuckle rumbled in his chest. "Raventomb might die of old age before a decision can be made, no matter how many times his forces have launched small incursions and raids. He's only an annoyance in the eyes of the vast majority, and that's been his greatest shield up to now," he declared with finality. "That's," Wyatt began, managing to catch himself before the words, "the most stupid thing I've ever heard," left his mouth. He was partially aware that nobles aren't fond of changes and threats to their power. He also knew that the Royal Navy moved slowly, but he never considered that there were so many steps on what, to him, was a straightforward path. What was the point of holding long debates on a problem that threatened the principality so openly? Wasn't the solution a simple one? Then again, he wasn't a noble or had the power to dictate anything of that magnitude. But if it were up to him, he'd gather as many forces as possible and kill Raventomb in his home. Just imagining how many tens of thousands had died at that pirate's hands, how many had been taken as slaves, and how many lives had been ruined thanks to sheer inaction, brought mainly blue bloods debating on who'd claim more honor and glory, was enough to ignite the fire of anger inside him. Glory and honor, it always comes down to that. Honor and glory, prestige and influence. Worthless. Why do they love such worthless things? What possible value do they see in it? They obsess over them while others die, Wyatt thought, growing angrier by the moment. An amused humming broke his line of thought, returning his focus to the aged commander. Frustrating, is it not? Redford asked rhetorically. I don't suppose that you approve of such a lackluster response against a real, palpable threat, Wyatt. Know that you're not alone in sharing that anger that must be coiling inside of you? Wyatt opened his mouth, but Redford raised a palm, stopping him. There's no need to apologize or make an excuse. I'm among those few who share your feelings, Wyatt. This isn't the first time I've encountered Raven Tomb. Wyatt was taken aback. I wasn't aware, sir. Unsurprising. Most deeds remain within close circles and are hardly spread unless done so intentionally or present themselves as a significant, noteworthy victory that the entire principality can rejoice over. I'd be surprised if you knew about the event that led me to claim my title as Vorpal Strike. Redford narrowed his eyes as memories came back to him. I was a lieutenant back in the day, barely a year fresh out of the academy, when I encountered Raven Tomb for the first time. He'd already made a name for himself by then. The gray-haired man stared at the ceiling for several seconds before continuing, his gaze finding Wyatt's. I was part of the First Fleet when Raven Tomb attacked House Anturia's territory. A daring, mocking assault. Most of the fleet was docked, ready for war games, tournaments, and a great parade. A display of the Principality's grandeur, he chuckled. Prince Albert Astor loved his parades. But I digress. I chose to remain in the active remnants of the fleet. That's when the Intelligence Division learned of the imminent attack. Elements of the 1st, 4th, and 3rd joined together to face off against the incursion. We arrived when the battle in the system was already raging. Redford's lips curled into a neutral, distant smile. I won't bore you with the details, but the engagements lasted an entire week. Raven Tomb had managed to convince several pirate groups and even 2 syndicates to work with him as they assaulted a large industrial world, intending to ransack as much as possible. During that engagement, our fighter forces were all but decimated by Raven Tomb's traps and ambushes. I was lucky to survive, but I learned from it. After I detected more traps and ambushes, I began to counter them. First 1, then 2, then a dozen until, by the time reinforcements arrived and the remnants of the pirates escaped, including Raven Tomb, I earned my silver ace mark, he grumbled, dissatisfied. We were nowhere near eliminating Raven Tomb, though we managed to destroy other notable pirates and even a rebel insurgency. To this day, I am certain that Raven Tomb's ultimate goal with that raid was the deaths of his rivals so he could ascend in power. Defeated, yes, but not without taking significant plunder and causing the deaths of an admiral. The gray-haired man sighed. I have never encountered Raven Tomb again, yet his reputation and power continued to grow. Wyatt frowned, absorbing every detail shared with him. So he killed an admiral and got to live. Did no one try to go after him and his pirate ilk? The older man scoffed. I tried. Cornelius tried. Joseph tried. By Julius we tried. But everyone else was more than happy to claim victory and shower themselves with hollow accolades and tales of valor. My own father nearly exiled me over my insistence and opinion on the matter. The old obstinate, stubborn fool he was, he shook his head slowly. Eventually he became a pirate lord, and his threat only increased. More smaller raids and lesser-scaled incursions followed over the next decades. He nearly died twice at the hands of Andrew Caiston. Twice he escaped. Now that made Wyatt recoil in surprise. Andrew Caiston? Casimir's father? The same, Redford answered with a nod. Andrew Caiston was not only one of the greatest ROSF of his time, but he was also a talented commander, and there was great expectation he'd become a fleet admiral. Yet, he had few allies and many rivals and detractors. He was largely seen as a disruptive element for his proactive views that ran counter to the established doctrine and the rules of engagement. Under his command, several rebel groups were expunged, several pirate groups were destroyed, and an entire syndicate was purged, leading to the recovery of 2 fallen systems in the span of a decade of service. Wyatt listened in silence, stunned by the revelation. As I said before, Andrew Caiston and Ykanti Adante collided twice. The first time, Andrew boarded his flagship and nearly decapitated him. If I recall correctly, Raventomb bears the scar on his throat as both a trophy and a sign of mockery. The second time came a little over a decade later. Raventomb tricked Andrew, sending in a body double while he escaped in a simple hauler. By the time Andrew realized he'd been fooled, Raventomb was long gone and out of his reach. Redford's voice was serious, showing his own frustration. Andrew Caiston made dozens of proposals and twice as many requests to form a significant task force to go after Raventomb and destroy his meager empire. He was denied and ignored each and every time. His plans were laughed at and discarded as worthless. Fingers pointed at him as an overreacher. Tongues lashed him as a pretentious glory-seeker. The irony of the situation was almost laughable. Andrew did the unthinkable. He denounced his superiors as inept cowards, afraid to face danger and unwilling to end a threat to the principality. The punishment was terrible, I later learned. He was demoted from his rank of Earl to that of Count. He was forced to pay a hefty sum of money, and he was publicly lashed 100 times for gross insubordination. Redford's lips tightened with disgust. After that, he was ridiculed openly. False charges were regularly presented against him, and he was removed from his post. But he never bent, never broke. He retired from the Royal Navy months later and took command of his house's defense fleet. He paused for a moment, collecting his thoughts. I'm not sure what happened, but Andrew never stopped trying to raise forces to go after Raventomb. He tried to make alliances and allocate funds to reinforce his house's military-grade vessels. All ended in failure. I suspect his father, Tamarin Caiston, had a hand in those failures. I cannot prove it, but I hold no doubts that he is responsible for such failings. Wyatt nodded slowly, his anger quelled and replaced by the whisper of respect toward the man. A traitor he was, but after listening to Redford's recounting of events, he couldn't blame him. Not entirely. He did his best and was betrayed by his superiors. And for what? For wanting to end the very threat that was barreling into the Fanhurst system? If this is a joke, then it is a terrible one, he thought with disdain. Commander, were you and Andrew Caiston close friends? Friends? Redford let out a small laugh, then shook his head. We've never shared more than a curt greeting, if that, Wyatt. I only know of Andrew through reputation, service files, and his records. Yet I can't help but admire the man for his tenacity. Wyatt nodded, though not in full understanding. I see, Commander. It's such a shame that he was shoved aside like that. To know that even a noble of his standing, a member of a great house, can be treated like that? I don't know if I should laugh or worry. Redford returned the nod. Don't be mistaken, Wyatt. Andrew Caiston is our enemy, and he will be captured or eliminated. He is one of the greatest minds serving Duke Draymore. If Raventomb fails to draw him in, then it means that whatever he is doing is more important. If he comes personally, we'll capture him. If he doesn't, then I will urge Clara to end Raventomb's threat once and for all. He has a pathetic little empire, a few jumps outside space claimed by the Principality. A collection of 12 systems governed by his lawless, impudent pirate ilk. They've existed for too long. Far too long. But with the loss of their leader, their threat will be minimized until we can mount a real force to strike them down once the prince claims his rightful position. Wyatt said nothing, choosing to remain silent. But how long will that take? Months? Years? I never realized the Royal Navy was so passive. I'm just a dumb, uneducated commoner, but isn't it better to just go and eliminate a threat to the Principality? Maybe it costs too many credits, or are they just lazy cowards? Wyatt thought, chuckling internally a moment later as he realized that such a thought mere months ago would have caused him to go into a near panic over being discovered. He was entirely sure how borderline treasonous that thought was, but he couldn't stop it. What was he supposed to think when presented with that information? He was certain there were more details and other aspects to be considered that he did not know about. Yet that did little to change his mind. Being a bloody blue blood gets worse by the day. Let's set this unpleasant topic aside, Wyatt. We'll get to discuss it at length during the coming meeting. Redford pressed forward, his posture relaxing. You haven't replied to any of the letters and messages you've received? Wyatt shook his head as a tired sigh he'd been storing for far too long escaped his lips. No, Commander. I haven't, as per your advice. I've only accepted all. Pleading eyes looked up at the gray-haired man. For how long will I continue to receive them, sir? My desk's drawers are almost full with congratulatory letters and proposal petitions. Redford had to stifle a laugh before replying. You won't have to worry about the former for much longer. The latter? A smirk formed on his lips, letting the silence finish the rest of his sentence. Truly? He asked, his voice weak and dispirited. I believe Cynthia and Clara have already briefed you on the matter regarding your enviable position of availability, Redford asked, his smirk growing slightly. They did early on, sir, he said, relieved and thankful to both of his friends. Do you know what's worse, sir? Wham, my youngest brother, sent me a short message a few days ago. Of what? A picture of a bunch of letters stacked together and the message, If you don't want to, I can talk to the ladies for you. He chuckled, slowly shaking his head. I hope Weskel is keeping Wham in check. I wonder how many more I will get. Maybe we can use it as kindling for an outdoor barbecue. We can afford the best Clixall meat and red lachoas and galas, he commented with a touch of longing in his voice. No matter how much he wanted to, he couldn't use the QEC and the network because the Nornavio didn't have a communications lounge. It could connect to the Principality's wide network, of course, but without a proper private booth, instantaneous communications were impossible. It didn't matter that much. He was used to not speaking to his brothers and parents for months or years on end without so much as a single brief voice or text message. But recent events had made him worry over them constantly. Not that it took away from all the annoying proposal letters. The thought that there were at least 10 times more of them waiting for him back home was, honestly, a depressing thought. How many more would there be by the time he had another chance to talk with his family again? Would every lady in Volantis try to seduce him? He blinked as a sudden thought crossed his mind. Wait, if what Clara and Cynthia told me is true, and the goal of those ladies is to climb the social ladder using me as a step, then who put them up to it for those who don't know me? Not all of them can be moved by personal initiative, right? Ambition, perhaps. But, oh no. No. They were ordered to do it. Which means that those proposal letters come from their fathers and the heads of their houses. Am I being proposed to indirectly by much older men? Assaulted by his betraying imagination, Wyatt managed to suppress himself from gagging. Deciding to spare his sanity, at least for the moment, he set those thoughts aside, employing far more effort than he thought was needed. Once he regained a semblance of composure, he noticed that Redford was looking at him with that same serious yet distant glint in his eyes from before. When their gazes met, it was gone instantly, and the older man offered a smile. My oldest son Ren would share in your plight, Wyatt. Had you met, I'm sure you would have found mutual friendship, Redford offered gently. Fortunately for him, betrothal was achieved. Wyatt stared at the man he'd come to truly respect, a far cry from their first meeting, and returned the smile. He's engaged to Clara's older sister, right? Megan Astor, if I remember correctly? He is. They are fortunate, said Redford, his smile faltering little by little. Whilst I'm not suitable to offer much wisdom in such affairs, Wyatt, I can say that it is in your best interest to think carefully before choosing your wife. Don't be swayed by high promises and seemingly easy rewards, nor be deluded by sentimentality or sensuality. A strong partner will only benefit you in more ways than one. I understand, Commander, Wyatt replied. The two men shared a long, silent moment before their eyes flickered, receiving the same message at the same time. Their heads turned to the door a second before it opened. In came the blonde princess, followed by her blue-haired bodyguard. The two men offered a curt, respectful nod to the arriving women as Clara sat at the head of the table and Cynthia stood behind her. Both women returned the gesture in turn. No words were exchanged as they waited for 2 long minutes until the doors opened again to reveal the head officers, all entering one by one, each offering a salute before taking their respective seats. Arriving near the end, Wyatt saw 2 officers he didn't recognize. The first was a fetching woman with sand-colored skin and intense golden eyes. Her cheeks were slightly freckled, and her hair, though short, was black and shiny as obsidian. Her insignia placed her as a lieutenant commodore, he noticed. The second, another lieutenant commodore, was a brick of a man with fair skin, thick, muscular arms, an ample chest, short, trimmed brown hair, and high-end cybernetic eyes. Despite his tough exterior, however, his expression was relaxed. He, too, offered a curt salute before taking his seat. It took Wyatt only a moment to realize they were the commanding officers on the Reaper's Eye and Reaper's Blade, respectively. Finally, Captain Milcades, wearing his full armor, entered the room, followed by a twitchy Ykanti, absorbed in his own little world, making several gestures with his fingers. Wyatt couldn't stop his lips from forming a small smile as Jincho jumped on his seat at the end of the table and then plopped down. He also noticed that several glares were directed at Jincho, as he was the only one who didn't salute when he entered the room. Jincho muttered, finally noticing the glares after 10 seconds of muttering. 6 eyes blinked in sequence before his beak opened, then closed in reflection. "Ah, yes. Forgot." "Salutations," Jincho said, offering a half-hearted salute that, were it not for his twitching, it would have been seen as a show of insolence. Wyatt glanced at Clara, who wore her stern, stoic mask, but beneath it, he was certain she was smiling widely at the display. I wonder how that twisted sense of humor of hers was born, he thought to himself, only to gain a glance from the princess. He merely raised an eyebrow. Then Redford cleared his throat, gaining everyone's attention. The heterochromatic-eyed pilot listened as the gray-haired man went over the current situation from the moment the SOS signal was received, explaining who Raventomb was, including some of his most significant assaults, his usual objectives, and the current status in the Fanher system. And the situation was grim. Thanks to the dispatched probe sent by the Reaper's Eye after its arrival in the system, they weren't entirely blind. They couldn't detect the bulk of the pirate fleet, but the other activity in the system told them enough, as they couldn't access the Caiston local network without outright revealing themselves. But they could listen. Civilian vessels were scattering, burning as fast as they could to the nearest jump point that would deliver them to safety. Civilian ships unable to perform FTL jumps were either running silent or were hiding in moon or asteroid bases, hoping to be ignored or go undetected. The network was flooded with cries for help, and there was no guarantee that the pirates wouldn't destroy the comms buoy. Galt Tirome was certain they would destroy it at some point during the battle, isolating not just the planet but the system itself, and preventing communications from entering or leaving. "We don't know how big the pirate fleet is, my princess. From the chatter we were able to pick up, over 50 near-simultaneous warp signatures were detected," explained Seratin de Shire, as the holographic display marked the point of entry from an unused jump point. There were early warning satellites stationed near the jump point. They were destroyed almost immediately after the first signatures were detected. "Likely there will be significantly more ships." A line appeared, creating a path toward the sole habitable planet in the system, Rankov. "The home defense fleet has made formations around their orbital station. There are likely several defensive satellites in the planet's orbit and around the station, bolstering it. What other defenses they have at their disposal is unknown to us, my princess," Galt added, as the orbital station appeared on the display alongside the planet. "We've detected nearly 60 ships, but over half of them match closer to civilian signatures. The defense fleet is limited to frigates and corvettes. I suspect that the ruling minor house of this world already counts its vessels in this force. The rest? Likely these civilian-class ships were either conscripted or volunteered themselves to aid the defense fleet." "A valiant sacrifice," Donato Lintar praised. "Maybe even crucial. They won't do much, but they will draw some attention and firepower away from the defense fleet." It was callous, but his words were true, and, surprisingly, his voice lacked the self-righteousness that was so prevalent in other members of House Lintar, which could prove to be irrelevant if the pirates come in force. "Taking into account that a pirate lord is leading the charge, I'd be surprised if his fleet numbers below 100 ships," said Tallulah with narrowed eyes. "If significant Caiston reinforcements don't arrive within a standard day, the defense fleet and the station are going to be annihilated wholesale. Possibly before that, depending on the strength under Raventomb's command." Wyatt frowned as an uneasy silence fell in the room. Rankov was a colony world valued for its beauty, stability, sprawling cities, and an almost resort-focused economy. Luxury items and goods would be abundant, and of course plentiful slaves for the taking. That alone was reason enough for him to want to kill every pirate he was bound to encounter in the coming battle. Yet there was another reason why the pirates were attacking Rankov. The nobles on the planet. The nobles who could run were long gone, and those who didn't were securing themselves in the deepest bunkers and safe vaults they could find. He couldn't blame them. If the pirates captured them, it was almost certain that they would be ransomed if they were lucky or simply kept for entertainment, abused and tortured for fun, then killed and mutilated for their cybernetic implants. "They won't stop here," he said firmly. They knew when to attack. This is just the first attack of many unless they're stopped or injured to the point of forcing the survivors to return from whence they came. How long will it take House Caiston and the houses under their banner to gather the forces needed to counter these pirates? More will follow. Royal Navy elements loyal to Duke Draymore's cause will respond eventually, but at what cost? How many worlds, stations, and habitats will be ransacked? How many will die? It is an unfortunate reality to face, Lord Wyatt. But we are within Caiston territory. Enemy territory. The loss of life will be tragic, to be sure, but we have no obligation to intervene without benefit or purpose, Lupin countered. There is no doubt in my mind that the Noir Navio is a powerful vessel, but it is not indestructible. We've seen the limits of its abilities once already. With all due respect, I say that not even Lord Kalen could forge a suitable strategy that claims victory against such an offensive without proper support and a large task force under his command. Wyatt's frown deepened, his eyes set upon Lupin's impassive expression. Then should we just stand back and do nothing like cowards? To watch as they carve a bloody path and take innocent people who have no say or voice in this conflict, just to be turned into slaves or playthings? Do they not call the Principality their home as much as you and I do, regardless of which house they serve under? What is our duty if not to defend the Principality from all threats? The tension in the room increased tenfold in but an instant as eyes glanced about, unsure. "My princess, if I may?" Sabraska interjected before Lupin could voice an answer. With a nod from the violet-eyed woman, she continued. Perhaps there is a possibility to sway some of the pirates into betraying their fellows. Make them see reason or bribe them with promises of pardon and redemption. If you believe they'll listen to such a proposal instead of turning their guns in the chance to capture an Aster, you're delusional, Lady Caspars, Fabian countered. A gaggle of reformed pirate kids and adolescents proves little outside a personal victory for Her Majesty. Clara hummed softly, cupping her chin. You both bring a valid point, I must admit. Lieutenant Galt, do you believe that there would be those among them who would consider such an incentive? Galt shook his head. With all due respect, Your Majesty, the circumstances could not be more opposed to those that led to the experiment to reform a limited number of pirates. These detestable pirates, led by their pirate lord himself, are likely veteran raiders and sick, twisted individuals. In this matter, I stand in favor of Captain Fabian's observation. However, if you permit me, I could clear away any lingering doubts with the aid of Staff Sergeant Salazar Reed. Clara considered it for a brief moment before making a hand gesture, her permission given. Galt's eyes flickered several times, and within moments a screen lit up, revealing the face of a saluting Salazar Reed. Greetings, Your Majesty, he dropped his salute. Lieutenant Galt has informed me of the pressing quandary. From my charges, I've come to learn much. We already know that no two pirate groups are the same, as they operate in tribes, clans, gangs, and other groupings. Large groups of pirates are a rarity, such as syndicates and their ilk. Trying to entice them will result in failure. Personally, I believe reformation and reintegration are possible, but will only work on young adolescents and turncoats to their misguided cause. And only in small groupings, I'm afraid. Clara sighed. I was afraid that was the case. Thank you for your insightful aid, Staff Sergeant Reed. You may return to your duties, she said, causing Salazar to salute again before the screen turned black. Turning to her gathered council, she pressed on. The situation before is grim. We have no clear path of action, yet we must tread carefully. A dreaded, hated enemy of the Principality is attacking, yet they attack the lands of our enemy. Make no mistake, the order issued to divert from our original objective was not born of misguided mercy or concern. Such an attack is bound to bring Caiston forces to the fore. I did not have the luxury of simply ignoring the enticing possibility of capturing a member or several of House Caiston with high standing within their house. Her eyes scanned the room as she read through the cacophony of emotions, intent, and the whispers of surface-level thoughts. She organized them quickly and filed them properly, bringing order to the chaos and granting her an authentic glimpse of the paths each would take. Long moments passed before she turned to Redford. "Commander, if you will, this is your area of expertise. I relinquish the authority to formulate a working strategy to you," she said in a firm, solemn tone. Redford bowed his head slowly in a show of respect before standing to his feet. "As I'm certain you've all come to realize, we don't have an effective plan of action. Our information on the enemy is incomplete. We're in traitor territory, and we face multiple objectives that run counter to our current overarching mission, the capture of members of House Caiston serving in the military. Her Majesty has made it clear that above all else, our mission takes priority. If this system must be sacrificed, then so be it. However, such a measure must be the last option to be considered." The commanders flickered, and the holographic display shifted outward until the 3 dots representing their small task group were visible to all. The planet of Rankov was also marked, along with the defense fleet, the fleeing ships, and the projected trajectory of the still unknown pirate fleet closing in on their prize. There are 2 viable approaches given our current situation. The first is the simplest and the one that puts us, and more importantly, Her Majesty, out of immediate danger. "We will set course to this point," he said, and a new point appeared on the display, far away from Rankov and closer to a jump point labeled simply as Natelli, marking the system it led to, "and await the arrival of Caiston reinforcements. We will then shadow their trajectory and verify if there are Caistons leading the fleet. If they arrive before we reach this point, the strategy remains the same. Our objective will be simple. We shall not interfere in the battle, allowing our enemies to destroy each other until we can safely make a move to extract every Caiston, taking them into our custody. Following this action, we will leave," Redford explained, his eyes scanning the room. He found many make brief but noticeable displeased gestures, an eye twitch, lips pursing, a fist tightening. Satisfied with the reactions, he continued. "The second is more dangerous but much more duplicitous and underhanded in its approach. We will follow the same route and wait for the reinforcements to come. Again, we will shadow their trajectory and lay in wait as the battle takes place. If the reinforcements find themselves bested and in need of aid, we will interfere in aid of the Caiston forces. Our support in the battle will be provided under the condition to have their Caiston officers surrendered to us after the pirates are routed or destroyed. Should they refuse, then we will refuse to participate further in the battle and turn our guns upon the Caiston fleet, taking our prize by force if need be." "You may voice your concerns freely," said Redford in a neutral, stoic tone devoid of passion or joy. It was the ruthless calculus of someone who was used to the coldness that battle demanded. "Commander, what are we to do in either case if the reinforcements lack a Caiston at its helm?" Fabian asked. "Flaunt not your lack of critical and objective thinking before us, Deshire. What purpose does it serve us to stay if it doesn't serve to further our principal mission?" countered Lupin with his usual presumptuousness. "Whilst I do not share your tone, Lusanto, I agree with your observation. Willfully placing Her Majesty's life in jeopardy is a fool's errand," said Saratan as she leaned back on her seat. "However, Commander, may I ask why these 2 options are the only ones chosen as viable? Surely, with the Noir Navio's capabilities and the support from the Reaper's Blade and Reaper's Eye, much more can be done. The situation is bound to change in the coming hours, and with them our plans. Those 2 are merely the 2 options at our disposal that offer us the highest chance of success with minimal risk," Redford replied, crossing his arms behind his back. Saratan seemed satisfied by the answer as she merely nodded in response. Next to her, Sabraska tapped her chin with her index finger as she pursed her lips. "Commander, perhaps we could do more against the pirates? We could strike at them without their notice, avoid engaging them directly, putting pressure on their weakest elements. If they come in such large numbers, then there must be ships almost entirely dedicated to acting as cargo freighters. We could target those ships, destroy them wholesale to deny them the means to take with them the vast majority of their plunder." Tallulah smiled, nodding in approval. "It is a good start, Lady Caspars. But we should go further. I've seen footage and read reports on what these black ships are capable of. All preliminary simulations all but confirm my early suspicion that these ships were designed for powerful, quick strikes before slipping away. Hit-and-run tactics and quick-response skirmishing maneuvers, a malicious smile spread across her lips. We can pick their ships one at a time from the shadows, pirates and traders alike at our leisure. Our ships are faster, more maneuverable, and better in almost every measure. There won't be a need to put the princess's life at risk. An honorless and treacherous approach that breaks away from all rules of engagement and common courtesy, Donato began, crossing his arms, but his lips were set into a smirk. Good. Pirates and worthless traders deserve nothing but our contempt. However, for the sake of my troops, I must insist that disabling and crippling enemy ships to avoid reactor overloads must be a priority. Glory, ransom, prestige, and information can be gained through numerous boarding actions. Not to mention the message it would send to the rest of our enemies. Such selfish priorities, Sabraska protested. Seeking glory and accolades is a worthy cause, this I won't deny, but we are forgetting the people of Rankov. Have you ever seen what those animals do to slaves? How they work them to death or worse? I have. If there is no Caiston to be found in the traitor reinforcements, I implore Her Majesty to consider taking action against the pirates. Destroy their cargo ships. We can't save everyone, but we can prevent tens of thousands from sharing that fate. We're a day and a half away in travel time, Lady Sabraska. Even if we are to head directly to Rankov, we will arrive too late to prevent them from landing troops and commencing ground assaults. How many captured nobles will they have by then? Fabian countered, and paused for a moment, only to take a second-long glance at the still silent, expressionless Wyatt. Swallowing and barely preventing his hands from shaking, he added, And how many thousands of commoners? Will you condemn them alongside the pirates? Better for them to die by our hand than to suffer at theirs. It is merciful. Her expression dropped slightly. Then she recomposed herself. But please, Lord Deshire, don't insult me by pretending to place whatever little concern you may spare on the lives of mere commoners. Arguments went back and forth in support and against what course of action was to be taken. Wyatt listened closely to each point being made, to every counter-argument in favor and against in equal measure. Soon he found himself indecisive. He detested the idea of leaving Rankov and its populace to their fate. Unlike the rebels of Hago prior to the deal struck between House Ferentis, Clara, and Tornell, the people of Rankov were citizens of the Astorian Principality. They just so happened to live in a world owned by House who supported Duke Draymore's claim. Letting harm befall them when he could do something to, at the very least, lessen the blow made his skin crawl. Pirates are little better than Drazen. I'm not about to let them do as they want without taking a shot at them. Think, Wyatt. There has to be something that can be done without sacrificing our main objective, he said to himself, as he analyzed the holographic display in great detail. In his mind, he put himself on the display, piloting a fighter. What could he do with a single fighter against two enemy fleets? The answer was that there wasn't much he could do. A single fighter could do a lot of damage against an unsuspecting foe, yet alone it was vulnerable. Nimble, silent, and fast. Those were his advantages. His eyes widened slightly as he glanced around the room. But I'm not alone, and I'm not using a fighter. Just something that's a lot like one. Two other images appeared in his mind alongside his transformed fighter. The enemy objectives were clear. Plunder Rankov, take prisoners, and leave. But what came after that? More attacks across more systems. How many worlds would suffer? How many survivors would find themselves in despair, blaming their masters for their failure to protect them? Would they rise up in rebellion? Uprisings? A terrible realization manifested itself in his mind, a small-scale taste of what would happen if the Principality was engulfed by a civil war. And it all depended on the outcome of the coming battle. Yet with that realization made, another followed. Raventomb was the key to everything. Slowly he stood up, and as he did, the discussion stopped. Wyatt connected with the display, finding the experience jarring at first, but it quickly became manageable. "We must kill Raventomb," he proclaimed, pointing at the map. "It doesn't matter if there's a Caiston or more leading the reinforcements, we don't know if they'll arrive or not. Raventomb must be eliminated." "Do you have a death wish, Lord Staples?" Saraton asked, equally as perplexed as everyone who had heard his declaration. Not only are you suggesting to face a pirate fleet head-on, but do so by ignoring the primary mission as stated by Her Majesty. We don't need to destroy their fleet. Only one ship is enough. Raventomb's flagship. Without him, the pirates will lose their leader. They don't have a structured chain of command, and will either turn to flee or begin to fight amongst each other, Wyatt replied as 3 dots appeared on the display and a path was created toward Rankov. We can wait for him there, undetected. Discover the true strength of the pirate fleet and pinpoint his flagship. We then destroy it with Noirnavio's pulse beam cannon. If it's powerful enough to destroy a Drazen cruiser in a single shot, then what can they have that can hope to survive that? There was a moment of silence as glances were exchanged. Say we eliminate Raventomb, Tallulah spoke up first. What about our primary mission? What of it? Wyatt replied with casual dismissal. There are dozens of Kastans and only one Raventomb. If no reinforcements come, or if they come without a Kastan leading them, we lose only a few days at most. In exchange, we rid the Principality of a significant threat and protect as many lives as possible. A rather unglorious victory, wouldn't you say, Lord Staples? Lupin asked, eyebrow raised. Unglorious, but a victory nevertheless. It shall suffice. I don't know what's going to happen in the coming hours, but the plan I propose is simple. We go in, wait for the opening necessary to destroy Raventomb, and we take it. Then we can leave or hide. Lieutenant Commodore Tallulah Finnegan said so herself. Our ships will outclass whatever the pirates have, Wyatt countered. We might need to find a way to lure Raventomb for a killing blow, said Donato. Wyatt's expression turned resolute. Then I'll give him something to focus on. Are you insane, Wyatt? You'll get yourself killed, Galt protested. Maybe. But if my proposed plan is accepted, then I'll take responsibility for it and do what's necessary. Doesn't matter if I need to put my life on the line. And if I give my life to ensure a pirate lord is removed from the Principality's backside, then so be it, replied Wyatt with full determination. A sudden slam on the table caught everyone's attention. Bah! You die. I die. They die. Pretty Eyes die. We all die, Jincho said with a laugh. But not make it easy for others to make you die. Won't let Wormbrain die so easily. Need him to collect more data for me? A chirp rattled in his throat as his head feathers stood to attention. Prototype Mark II ready. Better. Stronger. Ready for real test in battle. What say you, Stern Feathers? Stern Fia, Redford muttered under his breath, but quickly dismissed the Ykanti's antics. Your plan of action is simplistic in nature, yet bold in scope, leaving us ample room to review and adjust our approach as the situation develops, Lieutenant Commodore Staples. He glanced at the blonde princess, who, in turn, gave him a tiny curt nod of approval. Your plan of action shall be implemented for as long as I deem it viable. Is there a final addendum you would like to make, Lieutenant Commodore? Yes, Commander, Wyatt replied, turning to Jincho. Can you make 4 more of those prototypes in 1 day and a half, Master Technician Jincho? Jincho's eyes gleamed with maniac intent. Can I? Dismissed, proclaimed Redford a moment later. Black Ship fans, have you picked yourself up a mug yet in our store? It's a great way to start the day with your coffee or tea in this glorious mug. The link is in the description and pinned comment.